The mid-18th century was a time of great change. Empires were rising and falling, and new ideas were taking hold. The American colonies were a part of this changing world. They were growing and evolving, developing their own unique identity. The colonies were becoming increasingly distinct from Great Britain. People from all over Europe had come to America seeking a new life. This diversity helped to create a unique American culture. The colonies were also a place of great opportunity. Land was plentiful and cheap, and there was a growing demand for goods and services. This created a thriving economy. Great Britain wanted to control the colonies' wealth. The relationship between Great Britain and the colonies was complex. This tension would eventually lead to war, a war that would change the course of history. Following the French and Indian War, Great Britain faced a substantial war debt. They looked to the American colonies to help shoulder this burden. This led to a series of taxes and acts imposed upon the colonists, which were met with increasing resistance. The colonists felt these taxes were unjust, especially given their lack of representation in the British Parliament. The Stamp Act of 1765 required colonists to pay a tax on all printed materials. The colonists organized boycotts of British goods and formed groups like the Sons of Liberty to protest these measures. The Townshend Acts, enacted in 1767, imposed taxes on imported goods such as tea, glass, and paint. These acts further fueled colonial resentment and led to more protests and boycotts. The British government responded by sending troops to Boston to maintain order. The presence of British troops in Boston was a constant reminder of British control. The British government saw the colonies as a source of revenue and a market for their goods. This fundamental difference in perspective would ultimately lead to the outbreak of war. Tensions in Boston reached a boiling point on March 5, 1770. A group of colonists began taunting British soldiers guarding the customs house. The situation quickly escalated, and the soldiers fired into the crowd, killing 5 colonists. This event, known as the Boston Massacre, became a powerful symbol of British oppression. The Boston Tea Party, which took place on December 16, 1773, was a dramatic act of defiance against the Tea Act. A group of colonists, disguised as Native Americans, boarded British ships and dumped 342 chests of tea into Boston Harbor. The British government responded to the Boston Tea Party with the Intolerable Acts. These acts closed the port of Boston, restricted town meetings, and allowed British officials accused of crimes to be tried in Britain. These punitive measures only served to strengthen colonial resolve. The Boston Massacre and the Boston Tea Party were pivotal events that pushed the colonies in Great Britain closer to war. These acts of defiance demonstrated the colonists' growing willingness to resist British rule. The stage was set for a revolution. In response to the Intolerable Acts, representatives from 12 of the 13 colonies met in Philadelphia in September 1774. This meeting, known as the First Continental Congress, marked a significant step towards colonial unity. The delegates debated how to respond to British policies and began to organize a coordinated resistance. They established committees of correspondence to communicate and share information between the colonies. The First Continental Congress drafted a petition to King George III, outlining their grievances and demanding the repeal of the Intolerable Acts. They also agreed to boycott British goods and began to prepare for the possibility of war. Militias were formed and trained, and supplies were gathered. While some delegates still hoped for reconciliation with Great Britain, others began to advocate for independence. The Congress agreed to meet again the following year if their demands were not met. The seeds of a new nation were being sown. The First Continental Congress demonstrated the growing unity among the colonies. It provided a forum for discussion and debate and laid the groundwork for future cooperation. The colonies were becoming a nation. Section 5. The Shots Heard, Round the World, Lexington and Concord. On April 19, 1775, British troops marched from Boston to Concord, Massachusetts to seize colonial military supplies. Colonial militiamen, alerted to the British advance, confronted them at Lexington and Concord. The ensuing battles marked the beginning of the American Revolutionary War. The shots heard round the world had been fired. At Lexington, a small group of colonial militiamen faced off against a larger force of British regulars. After a brief exchange of fire, the militiamen retreated. The British continued their march to Concord, where they encountered a larger and more determined colonial force. A fierce battle ensued, and the British were forced to retreat back to Boston. The battles of Lexington and Concord were a significant victory for the colonists. They demonstrated that colonial militias could stand up to the British Army. The news of the battles spread quickly throughout the colonies, galvanizing support for the war effort. The war had begun. Section 6. A Declaration of Independence, Forging a New Nation. On July 4, 1776, the Second Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence. This document, drafted primarily by Thomas Jefferson, declared the colony's separation from Great Britain and outlined the principles upon which the new nation would be founded. It proclaimed that all men are created equal and endowed with certain unalienable rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Declaration of Independence was a bold and revolutionary document. It challenged the very foundations of British rule and asserted the right of the colonies to govern themselves. The document was met with both celebration and condemnation. It divided families and communities. The Declaration of Independence was not just a statement of separation from Great Britain. It was also a statement of American ideals. It articulated the principles of liberty, equality, and self-government that would shape the new nation. It remains a powerful symbol of American ideals. Section 7. The Tide Turns, Saratoga and the French Alliance. The early years of the war were difficult for the Continental Army. They lacked experience, supplies, and training. They suffered several defeats at the hands of the British Army. However, the tide began to turn in 1777 with the American victory at the Battle of Saratoga. This victory proved to be a turning point in the war. The Battle of Saratoga was a decisive victory for the Americans. It convinced France that the Americans had a chance of winning the war. France had been secretly providing aid to the Americans, but after Saratoga, they formally allied with the United States. This alliance provided the Americans with much-needed financial, military, and naval support. The French Navy played a crucial role in the war, helping to blockade British ports and transport supplies to the Americans. The French alliance was a key factor in the American victory. Section 8. The Southern Campaign and the war's final stages. The British shifted their focus to the southern colonies in the later stages of the war. They believed they could exploit loyalist sentiment and gain control of the region. However, the British faced fierce resistance from colonial militias and the Continental Army. The Southern Campaign was a brutal and bloody affair. The fighting in the South was characterized by guerrilla warfare. Colonial militias used hit-and-run tactics to harass British forces. The British struggled to adapt to this type of warfare. They suffered heavy casualties and made little progress in gaining control of the South. The American victory at the Battle of Kings Mountain in 1780 was a major turning point in the Southern Campaign. It boosted American morale and demonstrated that the British could be defeated in the South. The Southern Campaign proved to be a turning point in the war, leading to the final British defeat at Yorktown. Section 9. Victory at Yorktown, the beginning of the end. In 1781, the combined forces of the American Continental Army and the French Army trapped a large British force at Yorktown, Virginia. The Siege of Yorktown was a decisive victory for the Americans. It effectively ended the major fighting of the Revolutionary War. The British surrendered on October 19, 1781. The American and French forces coordinated their efforts perfectly. They surrounded the British and cut off their escape routes. The British were outnumbered and outgunned. They had no choice but to surrender. The victory at Yorktown was a major turning point in the war. It convinced the British that the war was unwinnable. The Americans had won their independence. Section 10. The Treaty of Paris and the Birth of a Nation. In 1783, the United States and Great Britain signed the Treaty of Paris. This treaty formally recognized American independence. It also established the boundaries of the new nation. The United States stretched from the Atlantic Ocean to the Mississippi River. The treaty marked the birth of a new nation. The Treaty of Paris was a major diplomatic achievement for the United States. It secured American independence and established the boundaries of the new nation. The treaty was a testament to the courage and determination of the American people. The United States was now a free and independent nation. The Americans had achieved their goal of self-government. The future of the new nation was full of promise and potential. Section 11. A Legacy of Liberty, the enduring impact of the American Revolution. The American Revolution had a profound impact on the world. It inspired other nations to fight for their own independence. It helped to spread the ideals of liberty, equality, and self-government. The American Revolution was a turning point in human history. The American Revolution demonstrated that ordinary people could overthrow a powerful empire. It inspired people around the world to fight for their own freedom. The American Revolution was a catalyst for change. It helped to create a more just and equitable world. The principles of the Declaration of Independence continue to inspire people around the world. The American Revolution is a reminder that freedom is worth fighting for. It is a story that continues to inspire us today.